Renji would stand on guard as he blocked the path of Sosuke Aizen, Gin Ichimaru, and Tosin Kaname. Rukia would be holding close to Lois, who even in her speedster hero form could hardly move. The spiritual pressure given off by these three individuals was far greater than anything she'd ever experienced. It kept her in place. She knew that she had to act, but yet her body couldn't move on command. And for Renji, he could understand why. It was taking everything in his power just to hold himself together. In the midst of their standoff, Unohana would command her lieutenant Isane to inform everyone within the Serite of what was happening. Using her ability, she would cast a broad message all over the Serite, explaining to everyone the shocking truths of Aizen's betrayal and of his cohorts. For those who were either still engaging in battle amongst themselves or hunting the Ryoka, all of that had been brought to an end, as now the treachery had been revealed. For Aizen, he was in no real rush or qualm when facing against Renji. In fact, he felt like now was the time to enlighten on the situation. He made it very clear that while he did not want to kill Renji, and in fact he wanted to avoid as much killing as possible, if Renji refused to get out of his way, he would be dealt with. For Ichigo, Clark, and the others, as they were making their way from the execution hill, moving down the massive flights of stairs that were connected to the mountainside, Ichigo and Clark could feel the spiritual pressure of Rukia, Lois, and Renji. They were all back on Hogyoku Hill, and even worse, after hearing the message that had been broadcast to them, they knew that their friends were in trouble. For Aizen, he made short work of Renji and his pathetic Bankai, preparing to strike him down, only at the last moment to be stopped. Lois had attempted to take Rukia and run with whatever time she had left, as she had used the power of the H-dial once again. She thought that whatever time Renji could buy them, she could try to escape. Maybe they could run off the side of the cliff. Hopefully someone would be there to catch them. However, as Rukia was being held on by Lois as they attempted to run, they would be stopped as Gin would use Flash Step to get in front of them. A sinister grin on his face, the grin that had always creeped out Rukia for as long as she knew him. The grin of a sly snake that was slithering around ready to devour its prey. No. We can't have you leaving the party so soon. Well, you can, Ryoka girl, but I'm afraid that Rukia will have to stay with us. I can tell by the way you've moved throughout the Serite that you're not much of a combatant, more of a support character. You know that you don't have it in you to fight me, so you would be best advised to simply walk away. Of course, if you choose to stay, then you will have to suffer the consequences. And I can't promise you that you'll be alive to learn from your mistakes. As Gin would prepare to strike at Lois, he would find himself being stopped at that moment, his blade being caught in the palms of Clark, who wrestled it from Gin before throwing him off. And Ichigo, with his blade, would match with Aizen, who was preparing to strike down Renji. The brothers had managed to arrive in time, moving ahead of the others back up Hogyoku Hill to rendezvous with Renji, Lois, and Rukia. Well, Renji, Ichigo would say, we had to come back and bail you out once again. From the way you're looking, you seem tired, and all you had to do was carry Rukia on out of here. You know, I was just about to thank you, and then you just had to go and open your big fat mouth. So, you know as well as I do, we can't just run from these guys. Who said anything about running? Ichigo said. We plan on staying to fight. And we have the culprits who's been causing all this chaos. Aizen would simply grin to himself. The powerful Ryoka had now arrived, the human child who gained the powers of a soul reaper, and the Kryptonian who was raised on Earth. Truly perplexing and interesting individuals, wondering about the events that could have brought them all forth. Renji, Ichigo, and Clark would all stand together, knowing that if they had any chance of winning, it would come from an all-out assault. Renji was going to create a diversion to buy them time. Ichigo and Clark, they would have to move in tandem with one another. "I'm going to have to buy you guys an opening," Renji would say. "When I do, you'll have to move in and strike him down as quickly as possible." "You heard that right?" Ichigo would say to Clark. "Of course. He won't know what hit him." "I know I've asked a lot of you," Renji would say to his broken blade. "And I know that it's going to be painful, but please, bear with me for just a little while longer. And now, roar, Zabimaru!" The fallen pieces of Zabimaru would begin to fly into the air before crashing into the ground and all around Aizen. Ichigo and Clark would move side by side as they attempted to rush at Aizen quicker than he had a chance to react. Ichigo figured that if he struck first, Aizen was bound to match him, sword for sword. Ichigo went in for a slash, but his blade was stopped. However, it wasn't by another sword. It was by his finger. Ichigo was stunned. However, he was fast enough to avoid the lethal slash that came from Aizen. Not entirely. He still suffered the severity of the attack, but he had moved just long enough, moving out of the way as Clark would attempt to deliver a devastating right hook onto Aizen, only for him to be met with the same fate also. I see. You both attempted to lead in with a double assault. Your attack would be the bluff, am I right? And then your brother would come in with the closing strike. It's not a bad plan. In fact, if you were to use this little charade on anyone else, I'm pretty sure you would have landed a successful hit. Unfortunately for you, I am not everyone else. Though I must say, your help was greatly appreciated, Ryoka boys. You've done so much for my ambitions. You'll have to give Kisuke my regards. Both Ichigo and Clark would be confused by that statement, as they asked what exactly did he mean by that. What did Kisuke have to do with any of this? Aizen was even more perplexed to see that the boys truly didn't know anything. Although using his quick deduction skills, he was able to tell that they were just in the dark. It's such a shame. Kisuke trusts you that little, and yet he sent you all this way to do his dirty work. I knew that you were going to come. I even knew that you were going to use Kokaku's cannon to get here. I even knew that you were going to land in the West Rukon district. I've known all of it from the very beginning. Aizen would take the time to enlighten them, telling them that for Soul Reapers, there were 4 basic fighting techniques: Zanjutsu, Hakudo, Hoho, and Kido. However, for a Soul Reaper, there were always limits. No matter how hard a Soul Reaper trained, in the end, there was a limit to how much power they could reach, whether great or small. However, if someone wanted to surpass their limits, they would have to seek an alternative method. The method of becoming a hollow, or vice versa, if a Hollow wished to become a Soul Reaper. However, this was seemingly impossible. There was a barrier within the body, a limit that blocked both sides from ever taking place. You could say it was an ultimate oxymoron, because through normal means, a Soul Reaper could never be a Hollow, just as a Hollow could never be a Soul Reaper, at least not simultaneously. However, Kisuke Urahara had figured out a way to do so. He invented a device known as the Hogyoku. The Hogyoku had the capabilities of bypassing that barrier, allowing for the two impossibilities to yet become possible, to allow that of which could not be done and attain such a power. But of course, Kisuke knew that such a tool would be dangerous. Kisuke once served as a member of the Gotei 13, and his crimes for making such a device was banishment. However, Aizen planned to pick up where he left off, but finding the Hogyoku would prove to be difficult, because, sadly, a device of such power could not be destroyed. The only thing that he could do was seal it away and try to suppress it. But Kisuke had come up with a method of potentially being able to destroy the Hogyoku, to weaken it to such a degree that it would simply dissipate. And Rukia was the perfect test subject to make it happen. It started when Rukia had come to the human world, when she interacted with Ichigo and Clark. When she was in need of a Gigai, Kisuke was there to provide one, but it wasn't a normal Gigai. Normally, they simply suppressed the power of a Soul Reaper, but the Gigai that he had given Rukia was made specifically to wean away at a Soul Reaper's powers. The Hogyoku had been sealed inside of that Gigai and given to Rukia, with the hopes that the Gigai would dissipate Rukia's powers along with that of the Hogyoku, eventually allowing for it to dissipate, as it would destroy all of the Ryatsu, the purpose of the Gigai, and it would turn Rukia into an ordinary human. As Aizen was continuing on with the truth that had been hidden away from them all, he would suddenly find himself attacked by another captain of the Gotei 13, Komamura. Komamura would confront Aizen and the traitors for what they had done, attempting to strike them down with his Bankai, only for him to have himself be blown away by Aizen without any real need of putting forth an effort. Aizen would continue on with explaining everything he had done, how at the moment that Rukia had left the Soul Society, he had already put his plan into motion. He had the 46th Central killed, the jurisdiction of the Soul Society, who would pass judgment on those who had broken the law, and their judgments were absolute. After killing all of Central 46 and using his Bankai to give the illusion that they had never been killed, he used the Central 46 to give out his orders, believing that if he could have had Rukia executed with the Hogyoku, that would provide him the best way of retrieving the Hogyoku with little fuss. It would be a win-win. Since they would be executing their own judgments, they wouldn't think twice about it. Aizen would continue on with how, when the Ryoka had arrived, that put a dampen on his plans a little bit. But in the end, everything was as it should be. As he now had Rukia in his possession, he revealed that there was a second method to removing the Hogyoku, which was a lot less lethal in actuality. And with little fuss, the Hogyoku would now be in his possession. However, before he had a chance to leave, Aizen, Tosen, and Gin would find themselves surrounded. Aizen would have a blade put to his throat by Soifun and Yoroichi, along with the assistance of Jidambo as well as Kokaku. As for Gin, he had a sword pressed to his throat by way of Rangiku, and for Tosin, he was confronted by his former lieutenant. With all the other members of the Gote 13 who were available and anyone else capable of fighting, the traitors found themselves completely surrounded. As they asked why Aizen could do such a thing and the cause of his betrayal along with the others. Aizen, a once respected member of the Gote 13 and a captain, had now been accused of such treachery, things that could never be forgiven. However, for Aizen, he was past such notions of forgiveness, and, without any fuss, he would push all of his enemies away, and so too with his cohorts. Captain Yamamoto would warn everyone to stay back, as there appeared to be a ripple within the sky. Lois, surprisingly enough, had been the closest, as she attempted to rush forward to save Rukia, pushing her out of the way as Gin was attempting to kill them. However, Byakuya and Jean, both somehow conscious, would move in to save them both, and they would be critically wounded in the process. Lois, not paying any attention, would be shocked by an attack, as Aizen, by merely stomping his foot on her ankle, would shatter it. It caused Lois to yell out in excruciating pain. The others were shocked by the brazen conduct and the audacity of Aizen, as he and his cohorts were enveloped in a light, as they looked to the sky and saw Minos Grande reaching out to them. Yamamoto would reveal that this was the power of negation. It was a way of creating a barrier, a world within a world. It was a technique used by the Minos Grande to pull their allies to safety back to their home of Hueco Mundo. And now, with them being secured within this field, there was no way of reaching them. Aizen looked down to all of the Gote 13 that remained, to all of the people who were now his enemies. Aizen would remove his glasses and slick back his hair, now going for a different style, something that he had seen that Kryptonian boy do. He figured he'd take a page from his book. After all, if just removing your glasses was enough to be a new man, well, this was a new start for Aizen, as he made his plans perfectly clear to everyone that within this world, none of them truly had power, that there were those that tried to give a false sense of authority. No, the throne to true power was vacant, and Aizen made his plans perfectly clear to all of them, that they chose to hide in their foolishness of believing that they were the only ones. But no, there was a level above, and a level even above that, the highest of heights, a throne that many would think impossible to obtain. But for Aizen, he planned on making the impossible a reality, as he alone would stand at the top of all things, even the Soul Society. However, as everyone else was shocked by the revelations of what they had heard, they could feel another powerful aura that was starting to emanate. It was coming from Clark. He heard Lois's screams, and as he got back to his feet and saw the agonizing pain that she was in, and looking up to see the one that had caused it, he would immediately rush into the sky, directly to where Aizen's beam of light was coming from. Despite the warnings, he rushed high, straight to meet him, as he punched right at the beam, causing it to crack. Even Aizen was surprised by this, and for Gin and for Tosin, They didn't think that something like this was possible. You... I can see that you're upset, Ryoka. Or should I say, Kryptonian Ryoka. I've been taking notice of you for a while now. And I must say, of all the things, you were one that I could have never have anticipated. You truly are the one blind spot in all of this. And I must say that makes you rather special. Shut the hell up. You did that to her. Oh, your friend. Don't worry, it'll heal in time. I would be more worried about her than dealing with me. You're not going anywhere, Aizen. Mark my words. You and I will meet again. Oh, I'm counting on it. Don't forget, I think long ahead. And I have been making plans specifically for you ever since the day that he found you in that pod. But hopefully your mind is not too clouded on anger. Because allow me to leave you with these parting words. You're not the only Kryptonian that survived the destruction of Krypton. Clark would be taken aback by this information, so much so that he lost complete concentration of what he was doing and would immediately be knocked back into the ground, the repelling force of the aura of the Minos Grande that pulled Aizen, Tosin, and Gin back within Hueco Mundo. And with that, they disappeared from the sky. Immediately, all of the wounded and the injured would be treated and given the best medical attention possible, as Unohana would coordinate with the operations. Byakuya, even while having his wounds treated, would reveal to Rukia a long truth that had been hidden from her. The truth that his former wife, now deceased, Hisane Kushiki, was actually Rukia's older sister. They had been abandoned in the Rukon district over 50 years ago, and then, when Rukia had been left behind, Hisane had left her there so that she could marry to Byakuya. However, their marriage would be short-lived as Hisane would soon contract a deathly illness that would rob her of life. However, on her dying bed, she was only lamenting her regrets, and she asked one last thing of Byakuya, that he would take in Rukia and treat her like family, raising her like an older brother. Of course, all of the actions that Byakuya had taken had been against the clan law, so much so that it could have brought great shame and dishonor upon the family. But Byakuya, out of love for his wife, wanted to fulfill his vow to her. And thus, at the grave of both his parents and of his former wife, he made two vows. To his parents, he vowed that, in exchange for breaking the law this time, that he would never again break it. And to Hisane, he vowed to protect Rukia with his life. But of course, when Rukia was sentenced to death, Byakuya did not know which vow that he should keep. The vow to uphold the law, or the vow to protect his family. Byakuya, in the end, was grateful to Ichigo and Clark for what they had done. They had saved him from making such a choice, and for that, he was truly grateful. In the aftermath of Aizen's betrayal, many things would change within the Soul Society, but those changes would be addressed at a later date and time. For now, Ichigo and Clark would recover from their wounds and would actually make peace with the people who had formerly been their enemies. Rukia would apologize to both Ganju and Kokaku for her actions in the killing of their brother. However, the circumstances weren't as they originally appeared, and they did not hold the death of their brother against her any longer, and accepted her apology willingly. But then finally there was Rukia and her decision as to what she was going to do. Thankfully, all of the worst had been averted, and Rukia kept her life. With now their focuses being on the capture and elimination of Aizen and his allies, Rukia felt that her place now was within the Soul Society, and that she had no reason to return back to the human world. So at least for now, this was goodbye. But a goodbye with the potential of a reconvening once more. And for Rukia, she could never express just how truly grateful she was, even in her moment of despair, even when she felt like she had lost everything. Her friends had managed to inspire hope within her once again, the hope and the feeling of wanting to live, and that was something that no lifetimes could ever be enough to repay. But for Ichigo and Clark, as well as the others, they were grateful that everyone had survived, and they had kept their promise that everyone would make it back home. Lois would recover from her shattered ankle. Thankfully, the work of Unohana did incredible work on her leg, although now she had a crippling phobia, to say the least. It wasn't just the ankle being shattered that messed with her mind. She felt the extending force of what Aizen was capable of, and she knew one thing. For all the horrors that Aizen had committed, he hadn't even used the full extent of his power. If they were potentially going to face someone like him, then there was no telling what could happen. But for now, she would have to push those feelings to the side. She looked down at the H dial within her hand. It had served her well. She wondered what would lie in store for her if she continued to use it. Did she want to go down that road? Was this type of power really the power she wanted for herself? She was at least grateful, though, that she could help her friends in a time of need, and, if called upon, she hoped that she could find the resolve to do it again. With the help of the Soul Society, a new Dongai barrier would be made, allowing for everyone to return back to the world of the living. But before leaving, Ukitake would give to Ichigo a special item, the Substitute Soul Reaper Combat Badge. With this, it would identify him as a Substitute Soul Reaper, a process that was used sparingly in past times whenever there were capable humans who would serve as Soul Reapers in the human world. And with this would give him the jurisdiction to serve as the Substitute Soul Reaper for Kurakura Town, and would allow him to transform into a Shinigami state at will, without the assistance of Rukia. Ichigo would be grateful for the gesture, and he promised that he would carry out his duties as a Substitute Soul Reaper. But Ukitake would also look to Clark as well, since even without the need for a pass, he had the natural capabilities. Of course, he didn't have to if he didn't want to, but Clark would promise that he was a protector of all worlds. And if he were ever needed, no matter any world or dimension, he would do his best to help those who called upon him. With that, Ichigo and Clark and everyone else would say their goodbyes as they returned home to the human realm. The moment they had done so, as they made their way through the Dongai, they found themselves floating in midair. But thankfully, they got caught by Kisuke Urahara and his patented-made giant flying carpet. Kisuke was grateful that everyone had returned home safely, and they had managed to save Rukia. However, apologies were in order. Kisuke would bow his head in penance for what he had done, for putting them all in such a dangerous situation and not giving them the full details, robbing them of the true autonomy of choice. Because maybe if they had known the gravity of the situation at hand, they probably wouldn't have gotten involved. But for Kisuke to think such a thing showed just how little he truly knew of these children. Sure, the ordeal was far from easy or perfect, and in fact, they had probably opened Pandora's box and entered into a world far greater than anything than they were originally capable of understanding. But that wasn't important. The only thing they needed to understand was that Rukia was their friend and that she was in need. And for them, that was more than enough. However, they would ask one thing of Kisuke, that the next time he saw Rukia, he would apologize for what he had done to her. And for Kisuke, that was more than compensating for his shortcomings, and he vowed to do so. One by one, each of the children would be dropped off to their respective homes, until finally the last stop was for Ichigo and Clark, brothers walking arm in arm, returning back home from the great adventure and ordeals that they had been through. But in the midst of everything, they had managed to come out on the other side, and they had gotten stronger in the process. Sure, this world and many others were filled with powerful beings, dangerous beings, those who were seeking the destruction of everything that they held dear. And the ins and outs, they didn't fully understand themselves. But there was one thing that they knew for certain, without a shadow of a doubt. If there was anyone foolish enough to bring any sort of trouble to their home, to their friends or family, then they were prepared to defend them by any means necessary. Woe to anyone who attempts to bring their troubles to Kurakura Town that was under the protection of the substitute Soul Reaper and his big blue Boy Scout of a brother from another world. Ichigo and Clark Kurosaki, Superman and the Soul Reaper. Meanwhile, in the halls of the Watchtower, the 6 lieutenants of Squad 99 gather together. And that is the final transmission, Tomare would address to the other lieutenants. I still can't believe it though, Metamorpho would say. Sosuke Aizen was behind all of this? I never liked the guy, Jonah would say. Always looked like a scumbag to me. And those glasses, I always wanted to punch them off his face. But still, did you hear about the captain? Monkey Prince said. I can't believe that he and Byakuya actually lost to a Ryoka. 2 Ryokas, and one of them a Kryptonian. I could have sworn that they all died when Krypton got blown to smithereens. That's no way to think, Vixen would say. You never knew for certain if all of the Kryptonians had died that day or not. And now, with the confirmation of one, who knows how many more could be out there? This could potentially be dangerous for all of us. What? You scared of a couple of Kryptonians? Jonas said. Of course not. And we can't judge them all based off of the actions of a few. That's not our duty. We serve as the Intergalactic Gote. Our job is to serve and protect across all of the galaxy. Yes, the captain will be arriving shortly. We'll have to go over this in more detail, but it seems like we'll have to pay a visit to the Serite ourselves to reconvene with the other 13 squads. This seems to be a situation that they're not going to be able to handle on their own. And why should we? Jonah would say. Aizen's their mess. They were foolish enough to promote him in the first place. If you ask me, they're just reaping what they sow. They always go around acting all high and mighty, acting like they don't stink. As far as I'm concerned, this is nothing but pure karma. and I don't want us getting dragged into their mess. That's not the way to think, though, Metamorpho said. If they need our aid, then we must assist. If Aizen is truly the one behind all of this, and these are the actions he's taken so far, even killing all of Central 46, then this plot runs even deeper than we once realized. While the other 5 were all discussing it, the 6th member, the youngest of them all, had been rather quiet and reserved. She floated in the air as she was meditating on everything at hand. The only thing she could think of was seeing her uncle once more, because they had a lot to discuss. This concludes Bleach Legacy. What if Superman was in Bleach? Season 2, Part 10, the Season 2 finale. As always, when we get to a season finale, I want to take the time to say thank you to everyone who has been supportive of this series. It's definitely been a lot of fun to write. I had to be very creative when it came to the fights and to the powers of the characters. I know that a lot of things didn't really get fleshed out the way I wanted it to. I'll be the first to admit, especially when it came to Lois and the H-Dial. That was, as you all know, a little retcon that came in at the last minute to make up for other things happening with Power Core Productions at the moment. And I didn't fully get to flesh out all of her powers, but I do hope that I gave you guys a good sample of what she can be capable of doing, and there will be a lot more from her going forward as the series continues. All in all, thank you all for the support. Like I always say, can't do it without you. You make the channel grow. You make the core grow. Also, I do apologize. I took a break from doing the double uploads. I had a very busy week. Wasn't able to get to making the videos the way I wanted to. I could only work on one. This video is going to be getting out rather late. But we are going to be wrapping up What If Shinji Was the Green Lantern Season 2 next week, since there's only 3 more videos left before we close out Season 2 of that series. So I promise we will wrap up that series next week, and we're going to be starting another new series as we continue in anime DC Comics as well. Also, I do want to make you guys aware there are going to be some shakeups to the schedule for the rest of the year. Some major changes as well, so please stay tuned for that, to all the news and everything else that's to come out now and in the future. But without further ado, that will conclude tonight's video. So thank you, as always. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is Power Core Productions and Podcastings that's to come out now and in the future. I'm Javon Harrington with Power Core Productions and Podcastings, signing off, and I'll see you next time.